With Erismorn's help, you have defeated the Fist of Crota, as well as Omnigul, the Will of Crota. And now, all that remains to exact her vengeance is to defeat the son of Oryx himself. So let's dive into the pit and take care of him once and for all. What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to more Let's Play Destiny. Today, we are about to take on quite possibly the most broken raid in Destiny's history. At least the Destiny 1 version. But this is why we are looking at the Destiny 2 version of this raid here today. Back when Crota's End came out, Bungie was obviously still fairly new at the whole raid experience, and with Vault of Glass, they were able to make a very puzzle-focused raid that largely tested players, but once you knew how the mechanics worked, it became very easy. So with the next raid, they wanted to make something a little bit more combat-focused that actually tested players' abilities in that way a bit more. Now, because Vault of Glass was so puzzle-focused, they really didn't need to do much in the changeover from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2. It's largely the same raid. There were just a couple of tweaks made so that everyone has to be involved and half the raid's fire team doesn't have to just sit back and shoot things. And they also shortened the length of a few of the encounters that were a little bit too tedious the first time around. With Crota's End, the fundamentals of this raid were so thoroughly broken in Destiny 1 that I kid you not when I say that this raid was entirely and easily soloable. Yes, I'm serious. You could actually make it through this entire raid by yourself without a fire team, and it was the only raid that has ever earned that unfortunate distinction. Now, the reason for this was, again, because this was such a combat-focused raid. It was all about just killing things and surviving your way through different places where there were some contingencies put in place that were supposed to keep solo players from being able to thrive in a space like this, but everybody found an exploit somewhere or another. And then the one encounter that is actually very puzzle-focused was completely broken because of a specific rule that it had that was completely broken in half by self-revive mechanics that were only available in Destiny 1. So in Destiny 2, they changed a bunch. And the main overarching mechanic is this right here, this glowing light you see on this pedestal known as the Chalice of Light. We'll talk about how all this functions a little bit later, but right now we're going to go over what we're actually doing down here. What is going on in this raid? So the Dark Below was a very short expansion. It was, in fact, only 3 missions and a strike. Very, very quick. And all it was pretty much just setting up a lot of events that were going to be important to the Hive as a faction, and eventually, as it would turn out, would set up the later expansion known as the Taken King, which at this point in the Let's Play you haven't yet experienced if you're watching this chronologically, so I won't spoil anything for you, but that is Crota's End's main purpose, not to be a story of its own, but rather a prologue to a much larger story. Crota is a Hive god, and the Hive are very interesting for a myriad of reasons. The Hive operate on a theology known as the Sword Logic, and this logic works because of something that is inside every single one of them known as a worm. The worm is part of a curse that was put upon them by these creatures on their home planet of Fundament known as the Worm Gods. And this worm has to be fed and satiated, or else it will actually kill the Hive themselves. The only way to feed this worm is to kill, and to kill a lot. This is why the Hive make war, because the more that they kill, the stronger that they become. And what also strengthens Hive, especially the stronger, more powerful Hive, is dying. Hive do not have to worry about dying because they have a contingency plan, especially the stronger Hive. The weaker Hive don't really get off so scot-free, but they are kind of just the fodder that feeds the engine that is the Hive, mainly the Thrall and the Acolytes. For Knights and Wizards and even stronger Hive than that, they have this contingency plan known as a Throne World. When a Hive dies, they go to this place called a Throne World, and the Throne World's entire size and everything that's going on in it is entirely dependent on how successful and how worthy that Hive is. So very small Hive, very weak Hive, but Hive that still have done a number of things, that have killed a number of things, will have a Throne World so small that it's probably about the size of their own body. So not a big space to recover in. It's like they're contained inside a box, and they have to just sit in that box and heal and wait before they're allowed to come back again. And the worm is what will eventually bring them back. However, the very strong Hive, in fact, the gods of the Hive, will have throne worlds that may as well be their own world, an entirely new realm. This is because of the planets and galaxies of people that they have wiped out in the process of killing and making war. And the more that they kill, the larger this throne world grows. Crota is one such god because of his ability to kill, because of his power. In fact, so much of his throne world is as strong as it is because of the Great Disaster, which was kind of the prelude event to everything that happens in the Dark Below and everything that happened to Eris's fire team. The Great Disaster was a moment where the Guardians pretty much just got a little bit too big for their britches and assumed that, hey, we're strong enough now, we can start taking back the solar system after being chased back to Earth. First stop was the moon, and they figured, hey, we've left the moon alone for a while, but it can't be that bad. Let's go and try to take it back. What they did not expect was to find Crota leading an entire army of Hive in the pit, and Crota wiped the floor with all of the Guardians inside. It was the largest mass death of Guardians, permanent death of Guardians, in the history of the last city, and Crota really grew the size of his throne world over this one singular event. Now, to make vengeance, a bunch of other Guardians, especially very learned and smart Guardians, led by the scholar Toland the Shattered, who had done a lot of research into the Hive, found that there were other ways to actually deal with Crota, but it would require, instead of a gigantic all-out assault, a much smaller group of Guardians, ones that could stealthily go in and deal with Crota once and for all, especially as he recovered inside of his throne world. Because yes, while Crota did wipe the floor with the Guardians, he wasn't completely unscathed, so he still needed to go recover. Unfortunately, this was what led to the events of everything that happened to Eris's fire team, and while we're not going to go over all that today, I'm going to leave that mostly for the Shadowkeep expansion later on in the Let's Play. What you need to know essentially is that everybody died except for Eris, and even Eris was not left unscathed as her ghost was destroyed, thus leaving her mortal, even though she still has Guardian powers. So she was managed to crawl out of this place and come back and give us what information she had to defeat Crota, which is why our fire team is now in here. Now, we're not even in the throne world yet. We are just in a place called the Abyss, or as is known by the fans in some places, the Lantern Encounter, the Darkness Encounter. There are many different names for it. This is just a dark place where the darkness is so overwhelming that it is killing everybody that tries to set foot in it, and we can't really go very far without being slowed down. As we make our way through this abyss, these stacks known as Weight of Darkness will start to add up on us, and once we get even one stack, our ability to double jump is taken away. If we get to 10 stacks, then we can't even run. We are forced to walk everywhere. To get rid of these Weight of Darkness stacks, you need to huddle up next to these lanterns and let the stacks go down. In Destiny 1, all you needed to do was stand by the lanterns, and the stacks would recede. However, once you started standing next to the lantern, this would set off a ticking time bomb where the lantern would eventually explode, and if you were still standing next to it when that happened, it would kill you instantly. So you always had to be moving. In Destiny 2, they changed things up a little bit with this chalice mechanic where you have to charge up the chalice and dunk it on these lanterns to then start the effect of both the countdown of the bomb as well as losing your Weight of Darkness stacks, which forces you to work together as a team to pretty much bunch up and move from lantern to lantern as you go, all while trying to fight off Thrall and avoid all of the obstacles within. Now, the obstacles are new to the Destiny 2 version. Most of these were not in Destiny 1. There were a couple, like pits and whatnot, but a lot of these swinging lantern pendulum things were not in the Destiny 1 version. Just a lot of Thrall and the occasional knight with a sword. But I will also say that they hurt a lot more back in Destiny 1 than they do in Destiny 2. So, like I said, you have to deal with this chalice mechanic, and this chalice mechanic is what separates this version of the raid from the Destiny 1 raid. The chalice is an item that will slowly build up a charge over time, and it will actually build this charge up faster if you pass it off to, if you kill things with it, and once it is fully charged, then you pass it off to a teammate, excuse me. Once you have passed it off, whoever had the chalice will gain what is called, gain a buff that's called Enlightened. And the Enlightened is used to do various things throughout the game. It is used to charge up plates. It is used to charge up these lanterns, and for a couple of other things that will come up a little bit later. You pretty much need the Enlightened buff to get through every single encounter in here, but you also can't hold on to the chalice for too long or else it will kill you. This is why you also need to make sure that you're constantly passing it around as much as you can. There are also these little dunk spots on the floor. Those are needed to dunk the chalice into to light up more lanterns along the path. You can't just keep going forward, or else you will find that the next lantern is not lit up, and you will have to go back to pretty much just continue along, and this is obviously going to be a lot of problems for you because pretty much just standing around in the dark is never a good thing in this game, in this encounter. You want to be moving at all times, making your way to the very, very end, where we are finally going to be building a bridge. And this is also going to be done with the Enlightened mechanic. So it's just a constant juggling act where your team needs to stay together. And like I said, this Chalice mechanic is in every encounter in the raid. This was only in Destiny 2. This was not in Destiny 1. This requires you to have all 6 people, because in Destiny 1, you could just kill the Thrall yourselves, make it to each lantern, and make it all the way to the end and build the bridge. Now, to build this bridge, you, in Destiny 2, have to stand on a plate, and there's me dying to the Chalice right there, by the way, because I wasn't paying attention. But anyway, you have to stand on this plate and slowly build it up, but while you stand on this plate, you are stuck at Weight of Darkness times 10, which means you're basically all huddled together, back-to-back, shooting everything you can in a totally open and exposed place, barring things like Ward of Dawns and Wells of Radiance and things of that nature. But in Destiny 1, the reason this was so exploitable is because all you needed to do was step on the plate for a second to activate it. If you ran over the plate and then jumped up on a rock that is right next to the edge of the bridge, only Thrall and the melee knights would spawn in. Nothing else would actually spawn in, allowing the bridge to just sort of build up on its own, and you would pretty much be good to just let the bridge go all the way up and then just run to the end, which obviously is not a good thing, because that means that you are completely bypassing one of the key mechanics of the encounter, where you were supposed to kind of make this final stand at the end. And that final stand is meant to include a whole bunch of ogres that are going to spawn in, and in Destiny 2, they are champions. They are unstoppable champions, so that's going to make things even harder. So this is where this all comes into play. So Chalice keeps getting passed around, dunked into this plate, and now we're going to fight everybody off as we go. Of course, Well of Radiance does make this a lot easier to survive, but it is still going to be harrowing as we're fighting off everything without really being able to move at all, because obviously mobility is your best friend here. But you can see why this was completely broken. In fact, what really destroyed this encounter were simple AoE grenades and supers of that nature. So something like a Nova Bomb or a Vortex grenade, what you could do was just run up to a lantern, throw the grenade at the lantern, and then stand in the grenade as all the Thrall ran into it and just died, making it very easy to stay alive, especially when you had things like Devour active that made it really almost impossible for you to die under those circumstances. This Nova, you could also get this with the Nova Bomb, which could be combined with like an exotic like Obsidian Mine to get more Nova Bombs back, and yeah, it was just really ridiculously easy to make it through here. But this is supposed to just sort of be an opening encounter, and actually, as far as opening encounters in raids go, if we compare this to something like opening the door to the Vault of Glass in the last raid, it's a lot more involved. There's a lot more going on here, but this is also kind of why they give you, they try to give you good loot here, but even later raids really kind of wouldn't top this opening encounter all that much as far as, again, opening encounters are concerned. So in that regard, I think it's a very good one. And when they mixed it up a little bit more in Destiny 2, it actually became the hardest opening encounter in the entirety of Destiny's history. And that still holds true even after releases of raids like Root of Nightmares and Salvation's Edge. So on to the next encounter we go, and I want to say that I actually died here because it's supposed to fade out and then move us into the next encounter, but it didn't do that in time before I got into a turn-back zone, and then it just kills me. But the next encounter is quite possibly the most interesting one, and when this encounter is done correctly, even in Destiny 1, it's one of the coolest encounters ever. Unfortunately, this was the encounter that was broken by self-revives on Warlocks back in the day, as well as actually even just the simple act of sword skating with any other class. So here's how this works, okay? This is an encounter where we are supposed to move the entire team from one side to the other, which seems really easy. The problem is there's a giant gap in the middle and we can't make our way across. There is a plate on either side, because these rooms in a lot of ways are actually kind of symmetrical, at least in terms of the activatable mechanics. There's a plate and 2 totems. The plate is what builds the bridge. The totems kill the entire fire team if somebody tries to overuse the plate. So you need to have somebody on each totem standing there, keeping it at bay, and then you have the rest of your fire team trying to build the bridge and fighting off enemies as you go. Once the bridge is fully formed, you need to take a sword from a knight, which is specifically called a sword-bearer knight, and you need to take that sword across the bridge to kill a specific type of knight over there that can only be damaged by the sword. This, of course, is all with the chalice mechanic added in Destiny 2, but you pretty much get how that works at this point. It's used to build the bridge a little bit faster, and that's pretty much it for this encounter, actually. Aside from that, you just build the bridge and then dunk it, and then you proceed as normal. Now, we are also trying to get everybody enlightened, because you need to have every single person enlightened as they cross the bridge, so that's the other reason you're going to pass the chalice around. But the way my fire team did it was we would pretty much just give chalice to like 3 people, and those would be the 3 that would be crossing the bridge first, and then the last 3 can pretty much pass it amongst themselves as they stay over here and wait, because you can really only ferry one person at a time, because if they try to cross the bridge without being enlightened, they die. But again, obviously this wasn't a thing in the Destiny 1 version. I digress. You need to have the sword to cross the bridge. You cross the bridge, you kill the knight over there, and then you're on that side. After that, a new sword-bearer knight respawns, you rinse and repeat, you send a new person over, and continue as thusly. However, once you get 3 people over there, the 3 people that are covering the bridge plate and the 2 totems on this side will now step off, and then it is their duty to come over as the people on the far side basically cover the same responsibilities, but on that side, because there's a plate and 2 totems over there. You then have those 3 people over there cover the plate and 2 totems. You get the gist of it. However, the way my team does it is we kind of have a floater. We actually have just we have basically just 5 people with sword bearer responsibilities, and then the 6th, which is me in this case, is just the chalice bearer. And my entire job throughout this is just going to be keeping everybody alive, ferrying everybody across the bridges, as well as helping them weaken the knights on the other side with my debuffing weapon known as Tractor Cannon, which basically I just hit them with it and it makes them more susceptible to damage. And yeah, that pretty much is the gist of the encounter. But why this is so interesting is because, well, it really does require everybody to participate in a certain way. But again, the problem with this encounter in Destiny 1 is that they didn't account for certain things, or I guess they tried to account for too many things and made it very easy to break this encounter, which is again why they added the Chalice of Light, because in Destiny 1 you only needed the sword to cross the gap. There was no chalice. So to get across the gap, there were a couple of ways of doing this. The most common way and the most popular way was to just grab the sword from the sword bearer, go find the highest point you could find on the other side of the map, on that first side, and just use the sword to skate across the gap all the way to the other side. With Warlocks and Titans, it was very easy to just straight up make it. With Hunters, you needed to be a little more creative and land on a ledge that was like kind of below this section, but then you could jump up from there. If you are the only Guardian on this far side, the game goes, oh, everybody has crossed the gap, and it will just despawn all of the enemies that are on that initial side and start spawning all of the enemies here on the far side that will allow you to finish the encounter. You'll then just use the sword to kill all of the otherwise invincible enemies, and then you'll just kill all the rest of the enemies as normal, and that's it. That's really all you had to do to solo this encounter back in the day. However, I mean, this could also be broken with a 2-man if you had, let's say, one person skate across and then the second person die on the first side, thus causing all the enemies to despawn. And then if that person was a self-resing warlock, then they could revive on that first side and help them pick things off at a distance. And once the encounter was over, the bridge would just auto-form. So yeah, very exploitable, unfortunately, because otherwise this is such a great encounter, because it really requires everybody to have a role, to pay attention, to actually be doing things. What I'm doing right now is, again, now I'm managing the totems because there's just 3 of us over here, so I'm allowing the first team to sort of step off and do their own thing, kill the sword bearer, work together, get enlightened, all those sorts of things, which at this point they're already done because I have the chalice. And we're pretty much just back to our normal jobs, but eventually, once we get this 4th person over here, I'll be able to help them kill the gatekeeper again, and then we continue doing what we're doing. But what's also interesting is there are ways to save runs like this should anything go awry, because the Enlighten buff goes away if you die, and you're actually going to see a point here in this run where somebody does die, and I'm going to actually be the one who goes back and rescues them and shows how this is all going to work at the end. Now, in the Destiny 1 version, there would just be a lot of things like ogres and wizards that would spawn at the end that you had to kill, but in the Destiny 2 version, things will end a little bit differently, and I'm not going to actually spoil anything for you, because it is kind of cool, so I want you to be able to see what actually happens when this encounter comes to an end. But we're getting there at this point. Everybody, again, is just kind of working together over there, getting the Gatekeeper. We got 4 over here now, so this is where I sort of trade places, and now I can go back to my role of just dealing with the Gatekeepers with all of my heavy ammo, which is easy to do. I am obviously playing a combination blow-esque hunter, which allows me to just stay alive and heal constantly while working close range. But there you can see that one of my fire team members has died on the other side. Okay, this is where things get interesting. So if we want to get them enlightened again, I have to bring the chalice back. This is why it was dunked here. So we reclaim the chalice and then go back to the other side while these 3 continue to stand on the plate, as well as the totems to keep everybody alive. I'm going to run across with the chalice and let it fully charge up, and then pass it over to my friend, who is then going to basically replace responsibilities with me. So as soon as it's there, they take it from me. I am enlightened now, but now I am the one stuck on this side, which means that they will then go over to the other side and, again, like I said, basically take over my responsibilities. So they got the sword, they're going to go over. Now it is basically just me on this side, soloing every enemy that I can and trying not to die in here, which I believe the reason I'm sure the reason I took up the responsibility is, again, because I have the highest survivability, what with my build and all. So just going to be taking out a lot of enemies, waiting for that sword bearer to spawn, and then once I can go across the gap, we should be good to go, because, again, we only need 5 swords to make it across, to dunk. A 6th sword is absolutely unnecessary. And the reason is that once they get over there and kill the gatekeepers, they're going to be dunking these swords into a similar looking plate as the one we've been dunking the chalices in, just one that's a little closer to the bridge and closer to the plate that we are standing on to form the bridge. So as soon as the sword bearer comes out, I'm going to kill him, and I can't, because I can't kill these barrier knights right now. I don't really have the build put together for that, but you will see here in a moment, somebody calls out that I've got enemies over here, and as I go over here to get heavy, eventually we're going to lure this guy out as I build up more combination blow. And look at that, I actually am able to kill these guys after all. Look at that resilience right there. That is just incredible. This is why we love ourselves with a good shotgun. So as I continue to attempt to not die, the sword bearer will eventually come in, and I will be able to take it from him. So a couple more go down. More thrall. And there's our boy right there. Okay, so this is when we get to work. Now, honestly, in this case, I probably should have just used my super because it's not really going to be necessary for anything else. But the good news is that this back room, and this is the case in both games, this back room, only the sword bearer can go back in here because this is where they spawn from. Otherwise, they won't get anywhere near you. So just chuck a super in there, take everything out, and then once all of them are dead, we grab the sword and take it across. All right, last gatekeeper to kill. Now, as far as these swords are concerned, there's 2 ways to use them. You can either do a heavy attack because they have infinite ammo. You can do heavy attacks all day. Or you do a light, heavy, which technically does more damage, but is just a bit harder to trigger reliably. So we're going to run up here, take care of this gatekeeper, lure him back. And then we're just going to knock him out, get that super attack down, which does a lot more damage. Notice how chunky these guys are, though. This is why I was debuffing them before with my tractor cannons, is because they take so many hits to knock out. But eventually, it goes down. And once we do that, we're going to dunk a sword. I couldn't, for a second there, I guess I couldn't find where to put the sword, but that should be the last one. All 6 of us are over here, and eventually the final part of this encounter is going to start. So like I said, just a whole lot more enemies would spawn in the Destiny 1 version, but in the Destiny 2 version, they do something a little bit trickier. And I believe I'm going to let all my teammates pick them up because I am instead going to be doing tractor cannon duty once again here as everything comes in. Here comes a bunch of barrier champions, wizards. They're all spawning in. It's getting a little dicey in here. But then, right here towards the end, rising from the dirt, and I think I'm still probably calling it all. I think we have to kill this barrier knight before they appear. But once they do, any second now. I'm actually surprised they haven't spawned in yet. I think, was there somebody that lost it? There might have been somebody that lost an enlightened here, but I honestly can't remember. But that could have possibly been the issue. Oh, that's right, of course. We didn't actually dunk it over here on the far side There we go. So once we get the ogres over on this side that start to spawn in, that's when things get crazy. So you kill the ogres, then the last set of enemies are going to spawn in here. So they die. And now that all the swords have been preserved, in the center, a bunch of gatekeepers are going to spawn in. And the game's going to be like, basically, grab a sword. You need to get to it and kill them all. So here they come. So this is where I'm just going to be debuffing everybody, because what I'm doing is not only making them easier to kill, but I'm also blinding them so that they don't attack back. So just constant tractor cannoning. Everybody knocks them around with a sword, and the encounter comes to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this first part of the Crota's End raid. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.